I was one of the only people in the White House during the pandemic who repeatedly clashed and challenged Tony Fauci on a whole range of things. Tony Fauci was wrong on everything. I was right on everything. He ran the biggest con game on you in the history of science. I mentioned nearly 60 times by name in his diaries, always in a negative light. I got in an argument within about 2 minutes because this SOB kept saying travel bans don't work. And I'm saying, no, they do work. He flips because he knows if people believe it's from the lab, that his reputation would go right into the toilet. During the first
Welcome back to the channel. Behind closed doors in early 2020, as a novel virus threatened the globe, an intense power struggle erupted inside the highest levels of the United States government. While the public saw unified press briefings and reassuring medical advice on their television screens, a fierce battle was waging behind the scenes in the White House Situation Room. Former White House Trade Advisor and Defense Production Act Coordinator Peter Navarro was one of the few high-ranking officials who repeatedly clashed directly with Dr. Anthony Fauci. Navarro claims that Fauci engaged in one of the biggest deceptions in scientific history, using media influence to build a public persona while privately acknowledging facts that contradicted his public statements. With Dr. Fauci preparing to face intense questioning on Capitol Hill, private diary entries and internal communications are coming to light, exposing a deep divide over travel bans, virus origins, treatment protocols, and economic lockdowns that shape the lives of millions. Let's dive into the conversation.
Trump term, I actually was the policy coordinator for the Defense Production Act. I was the guy who was trying to get you masks and gloves and ventilators and things like that. And what I want to talk to you today, and it's about 15 minutes before Dr. Anthony Fauci is going to testify on the Hill today. I want to also refer you to a Washington Times article that appears today. Here's the deal. I was one of the only people in the White House during the pandemic who repeatedly clashed and challenged Tony Fauci on a whole range of things that we interacted on. The China travel ban, whether the virus was a lab leak, the efficacy of lockdowns, the efficacy of using hydroxychloroquine, the efficiency of masks in guarding it. And Tony Fauci was wrong on everything. I was right on everything. And the reason why I want to state it that way is because I want to explain how the media helped America fall in love with Tony Fauci. But in reality, Tony Fauci is the science as Bernie Madoff is to investment. He ran the biggest con game on you in the history of science. And the diaries reveal all of his lies. I mentioned nearly 60 times by name in his diaries, always in a negative light. But let me walk you through some of the confrontations I had with him. It started on January 28th, 2020, in the Situation Room here. President Trump had sent me there to convince the people in the room that we should ban travel from China for obvious reasons. It's a raging pandemic already in China. People are coming in by the thousands on planes with the risk of infecting America. I didn't know Tony Fauci then. Didn't know who he was. He's in the room. I got in an argument within about 2 minutes because this SOB kept saying travel bans don't work. Travel bans don't work. And I'm saying, no, they do work. And that was my first interaction with him. And I came away thinking, this guy thinks he knows more than he does. And what annoyed me going forward was he would, every time I said he was against the travel ban, he would say, no, I was always for the travel ban. The diary shows him to be a liar. The 2 days before going into the Situation Room, He had numerous conversations with Bob Redfield at the CDC and White House officials saying he didn't support the ban. That was a lie. Fast forward now, look back here. This is where we often talk on TV shows and on both Fox with Maria Bartiromo and Meet the Press. I said very clearly in April of 2020 that that virus was in all probability from the Wuhan lab, full stop. Fauci publicly always denied that and pushed the from nature theory. But here's what the diaries reveal. They prove him again to be a liar, because in January, in his diary, he records several meetings with top scientists who tell him this thing's likely from the lab, and he acknowledged that fully. Now, what's so interesting about this is that he flips because he knows if people believe it's from the lab, that his reputation would go right into the toilet. Why is that? It turns out that he, through his agency, funded so-called gain of function research through this cutout called Eco Health Alliance. And that money then went to the Wuhan lab. The head of Eco Health Alliance has acknowledged it was for gain of function research. And gain of function research is how you change a bat virus into one that can jump to humans. And Fauci's plan, like Dr. Frankenstein, was basically to create a virus that could possibly remotely jump to humans and then figure out a way to get a vaccine to stop it. That was his grand Frankenstein plan. What he didn't count on was the virus could escape. And when that virus escaped, it would wind up killing millions and millions and millions of people. Fauci knew as soon as he figured out that connection in his own mind that he would be in deep, deep trouble if that were revealed. And so what did he do? This conspiracy, he got together with these scientists and they went out and wrote these scientific articles claiming, no, this is from Nature. And you can see a lot of clips. But again, what's important about the diaries is that in January, he acknowledged it was probably from the lab or could well have been from the lab. Third lie Fauci told, hydroxychloroquine. If you're like most Americans right now, and I say hydroxychloroquine, you're going to roll your eyes and say, that's quack medicine. The reality is the science now confirms two things. One, it's a very, very safe drug. It's a lot safer than a lot of stuff you see advertised on TV right now for various medical conditions. It's a safe drug, and guess what? It can help save lives, particularly in prophylaxis for people like first responders, things like that. So I had 1 million doses of hydroxychloroquine at the time in my role as the DPA policy guy. And Fauci, here's what's so interesting. In March of 2020, Fauci praises hydroxychloroquine as a very safe drug and urges its use. Think about that. And then 3 weeks later, he flips after the politics had changed. As soon as President Trump had embraced hydroxy as a possible medicine to be used for COVID, the left media got all over him. It became a political football. Fauci flipped, and he was saying, no, that stuff's dangerous. That's that kind of lie to you, the American public, it reveals a deeply flawed character and a deeply flawed man in Tony Fauci. Masks. He was like, where are your masks everywhere? Where are your masks everywhere? But privately in the diaries, he's like not a big fan of masks at times and expresses considerable doubt about their use. Why didn't he be honest with you? And then finally, the lockdowns. I wrote about this and I got on television about this and said flat out that the lockdowns were going to kill more people than letting people go out into society. And the reason is people died during the lockdowns from things like they couldn't get the medical tests they needed, and therefore their conditions got worse. There was depression, alcoholism, drug abuse, all sorts of ways that people died because of those lockdowns. And if you, my mother, I couldn't go see my mother. She was in her 90s and would pass soon after that because of that. And Tony Fauci was the guy who did that. So what I'm asking you, the American public, to do is look at those diaries a lot more carefully than the media is doing right now. It's curious to me that CNN and MS Now, for example, are not covering the story. They're just hiding it. And even some of the right-leaning media are focusing more on the celebrity aspect of Fauci rather than on the tough questions about things like the lab origin for whatever reason, I'm not sure. But the bottom line is today, when Tony Fauci swears to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, he's got a really tough choice because, and here's what I think might happen. The diaries are so damning, he's either going to have to plead the Fifth Amendment or he's going to have an epic dose of I can't recall. But the problem with I can't recall is that the diaries allow those recollections. And Rand Paul and others will be able to confront him with that. And then the problem with the Fifth Amendment, of course, is that most people think you're guilty when you invoke it, and he may not want to do that. So he's got a tough choice. But as soon as he starts opening his mouth and answering his questions, he's going to lie to you, just like he's always lied to you. And he's going to try to do it in the most skillful way that Tony Fauci does. But take a look at those diaries. I urge the New York Times, the Washington Post, CNN, MS Now, Morning Joe, John Berman in particular, who always used to give me a hard time and supported Fauci at CNN. Get to the truth and understand, because Tony Fauci, you have to take him off the mantle and take his halo off, because he did despicable things and made a lot of money doing it. I thank you. Do you have any questions? Yes, ma'am.
To Americans who are growing more frustrated with the economy because gas prices remain high, and it appears that the situation in the Middle East is starting to de-escalate with the latest strike.
I'm here to talk about Tony Fauci. Thanks. We can come back to that. Do you look at my columns in Real Clear Markets? Okay, so if you want to get more about my experiences with Fauci, read my book In Trump Time. It's a memoir that describes all my various interactions with Tony Fauci, number one. Number two, if you want to get answers to the question that was just asked of me about the economy, I do fairly regular articles in Real Clear Markets online, which talk about which way the economy's going. What we're seeing with the economy is strong investment fueled by the big, beautiful bill bringing investment in, 100% of expenses deducted, and the tariffs, which are encouraging onshore. We're seeing a trend down in inflation when you X out the oil. And so that's the trend that the Federal Reserve likes to look at, the core versus the non-core. And we're building, like we did in the first term, an economy based on Trumpnomics, which is a lower regulatory burden, lower taxes, strategic energy dominance, and, of course, fair trade.
The confrontation began on January 28, 2020, inside the White House Situation Room, sent by President Trump to argue for an immediate travel ban from China to stem the viral outbreak, Navarro immediately ran into fierce opposition from Dr. Fauci. According to Navarro, Fauci repeatedly asserted that travel bans do not work, brushing off concerns about thousands of passengers arriving daily from the epicenter of the outbreak. While Fauci would later claim publicly that he always supported the restriction, internal communications and diary entries reveal a different story. In the 2 days leading up to that crucial meeting, Fauci held multiple discussions with CDC Director Bob Redfield and top administration officials, explicitly stating his opposition to restricting travel. As the virus spread, another major divide emerged regarding its true origin. By April 2020, officials like Navarro were publicly arguing that the virus likely originated from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Publicly, Dr. Fauci dismissed these claims, steering the national narrative toward a natural origin from an animal market. However, Fauci's private diaries and meeting records from January 2020 show he had been briefed by top scientists who warned him that the virus appeared engineered and likely escaped from the lab. Critics argue Fauci worked aggressively to suppress the lab leak theory because his agency had funded gain-of-function research at the Wuhan lab through the EcoHealth Alliance. Fearing public accountability for funding research that modifies viruses to infect humans, Fauci helped coordinate scientific papers to publicly dismiss the lab leak hypothesis while secretly acknowledging its probability. If you are finding this breakdown insightful, make sure to hit that subscribe button right now and turn on notifications so you never miss an in-depth report. The disagreements quickly extended into treatment options and public health mandates. In early March 2020, Dr. Fauci initially praised hydroxychloroquine as a safe treatment for first responders, yet within weeks after President Trump endorsed it, Fauci abruptly reversed his position amid heavy media politicization. A similar pattern emerged with mask mandates and societal lockdowns. While Fauci aggressively promoted universal masking on national media, his personal writings reflected significant doubts about their widespread effectiveness. Furthermore, officials like Navarro strongly warned that sweeping nationwide lockdowns would cause catastrophic collateral damage, including delayed medical procedures, spikes in substance abuse, severe mental health crises, and economic devastation, far outweighing the epidemiological benefits. As Dr. Anthony Fauci prepares to testify under oath before Congress, he faces a monumental cross-examination. Lawmakers armed with newly released diary entries, agency emails, and official records plan to confront him on these sharp contradictions. Facing potential perjury charges or public fallout, commentators speculate Fauci will either invoke the Fifth Amendment or claim a loss of recollection, a defense made difficult by the extensive documentation now in hand. Beyond the health policies, the economic aftermath of these decisions continues to linger as the nation confronts the internal decisions, concealed doubts, and political battles that define the COVID-19 pandemic. If you enjoyed this breakdown, please hit the like button, leave a comment with your thoughts below, and share this video with others.